The crystalline vault of the consortium chamber shimmered like a cathedral of frozen light. Spires of translucent stone rose in fractal arcs, their surfaces pulsing faintly with stored energy. To most visitors it was breathtaking, overwhelming even. To Captain Elias Reese, standing at the heart of the chamber with 3 Terran delegates behind him, it felt more like a cage designed to remind supplicants how small they were. Before him, seated upon pedestals of woven crystal, the alien bankers regarded him without warmth. Their bodies were angular and faceted, each movement a slow grinding of light across mineral flesh. They were called the Valens, crystalline intelligences that had dominated galactic finance for centuries. And among them, seated at the highest dais, gleamed Archivist Zoran Tal. Zoran's voice vibrated like struck glass. Application for credit extension, United Terran Coalition. Reviewed, assessed, and denied. The words echoed through the vault, cold and absolute. No preamble, no apology, just the crushing weight of finality. The 3 Terran delegates shifted uncomfortably. Elias did not. He stepped forward, his boots clicking against the crystalline floor. On what grounds? His voice was steady, carrying the practiced calm of a man who had faced rockslides and asteroid mines and lived to tell the tale. Zoran's facets shifted, catching the chamber's light in sharp refractions. Risk assessment. Human governance remains volatile. Debt-to-production ratio exceeds sustainable metrics. Probability of default, unacceptable. Elias allowed himself a thin smile. Unacceptable to whom? Earth has rebuilt oceans, stabilized climate systems, and established colonies from Mars to Titan. We're not the desperate species we were a century ago. Another banker vibrated in low resonance. History demonstrates otherwise. Collapse, war, ecological mismanagement. Patterns repeat. Patterns break. Elias countered, meeting Zoran's gaze. We've learned to adapt faster than anyone you've seen. You call that risk. I call it resilience. A murmur of crystalline grinding spread among the council. To them, his words were impertinent. To Elias, they were the truth. Zoran's resonance deepened, final. Your people request 100 trillion credits. That sum could sustain 3 member worlds for decades. Earth does not warrant such investment. Behind Elias, Counselor Mira shifted. She was pale, exhausted from weeks of negotiation, and whispered urgently. Captain, perhaps if we… No, Elias said firmly, eyes still on Zoran. You don't invest in us because you don't trust us. Not because we can't pay it back. Zoran tilted his crystalline head. Trust is earned, not demanded. And yet you'll lend fortunes to the Aral Syndicate. Elias shot back. A cartel that enslaves half its workforce and defaults every other decade. Why? Because they're predictable parasites? At least parasites don't surprise you. The chamber rang with sharp vibrations, alien shock, or perhaps amusement. Elias felt the delegation's horror behind him, but he didn't back down. He'd spent years in tunnels where rocks weighed more than whole cities. A council chamber wasn't going to break him. Zoran leaned forward, crystalline ridges scraping. Humans believe words can alter balance sheets. They cannot. Lone denied. The vault lights dimmed slightly, signaling finality. The hearing was over. The alien council turned their luminous gazes away, already dismissing the Terran delegation as irrelevant. Elias exhaled slowly. Then he spoke again, his tone calm, almost conversational. You've made a mistake. That earned him a flicker of light from Zoran, faint interest breaking through the banker's detachment. Explain. Elias stepped closer to the dais, ignoring Myra's sharp intake of breath. You think denying us starves us into submission. But desperation breeds invention. We asked for a loan because we thought you wanted partners. Clearly you prefer dependence. That's fine. We'll take another path. Zoran's resonance dropped to a low, dangerous hum. Another path? Yes, Elias said. His voice was steady, but his heart thumped hard in his chest. If you won't sell us time, we'll buy the bank instead. The chamber froze. Even the crystalline walls seemed to hold their glow in suspension. For the first time since the hearing began, the alien bankers looked unsettled. The concept itself was absurd, a debtor buying out its creditor. And yet Elias let the silence stretch, daring them to call his bluff. Zoran broke it with a sound like shattering ice. Humans lack the capital for such delusions. Elias gave a humorless grin. Funny thing about humans. We're scattered, stubborn, and annoyingly resourceful. Every miner in the belt, every trader on Luna, every colonist scraping ice on Europa, we build fortunes the hard way. You've never asked how much we've got. You just assumed we had nothing. Zoran's facets dimmed slightly. Calculation, Elias realized. For all their arrogance, bankers could never resist arithmetic. Leave this chamber, Zoran commanded finally. Return when you accept reality. Elias bowed, not mockingly but with precision. Oh, we'll return. And when we do, Archivist, we won't be asking for loans. He turned sharply, signaling Mira and the others. They followed in tense silence, their footsteps echoing as the crystalline vault swallowed them whole. The heavy doors sealed behind them with a grinding of stone and light. Only once they reached the dim corridor outside did Mira hiss. What in God's name was that? By the bank? Elias, you've lost your mind. Maybe, Elias admitted, rubbing at the scar on his jaw, a miner's old souvenir. But desperation doesn't scare me. Being dismissed does. Counselor Imani, the eldest of the delegation, frowned deeply. Even if every Terran and colonist liquidated assets, we'd barely scratch the surface of their valuations. Elias stopped, turning to face them. His eyes carried a spark none of the others possessed. Maybe. Maybe not. They measure wealth in credits and collateral. We measure it in grit, trust, and networks they can't see. You'd be amazed what humans can pull together when someone tells us it's impossible. The corridor lights flickered as though echoing his conviction. Mira pressed her lips tight, torn between disbelief and reluctant hope. So this wasn't just bravado? No, Elias said. That was the opening move. He started walking again, boots striking hard against the crystalline floor. His mind was already racing ahead, assembling fragments of an idea so audacious it made his pulse quicken. He didn't know all the details yet. But he knew one thing with certainty. Humanity had asked politely. That era was over. Now, they would force the galaxy to recognize them. Not with loans. Not with pity. But with ownership. And it would start here, on Valen Prime. White heavy check mark. The private chamber of the Terran delegation was little more than a rented suite carved into Valen Prime's outer crust. Its walls glowed faintly with embedded crystals, alive with a low hum that made Elias feel as though the very building were listening. For all he knew, it was. On this planet, nothing escaped the bank's surveillance. Mira paced the floor, her shoes clicking in sharp rhythm. Elias, you embarrassed us in there. Do you understand? You called out the consortium in open session. We'll be lucky if they don't blacklist every Terran trader tomorrow. Elias sat at the central table, hands steepled, watching her with measured calm. If I hadn't, they'd already be tightening the leash. They've been circling us like scavengers for decades. This way, at least, we dictate the next move. Counselor Imani leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. You spoke of buying the bank. Outrageous words. I need to know whether they were just theater, or madness. Elias leaned forward. His voice was low, steady. Neither. It's strategy. And it's possible. The room stilled. Even Mira stopped pacing. Her frown deepened, but curiosity cracked through. Go on. Elias tapped the table and a small projection flickered to life. Earth, Mars, Luna, the Belt Colonies, Titan's domes, Europa's ice stations. Dotted across them were streams of credit tallies, shipping consortium shares, and private wealth accounts. Here's what the bank doesn't factor in, he said. They only look at Earth's official treasury, which is a mess. What they ignore is the wealth scattered across the diaspora. Independent miners. Martian trade syndicates. Lunar shipping guilds. All of them distrust Earth's government, But they trust humanity more than they'll ever trust aliens. Imani raised a skeptical brow. You're talking about uniting rival factions who can barely agree on shipping tariffs. Elias's eyes lit with something fiercer than hope, conviction. I'm talking about giving them one enemy they all despise more, the Consortium. They've been bleeding us dry for decades. You think Martian bankers like bowing to crystalline accountants? You think belt miners enjoy paying triple interest for loans they already repaid twice over? No. They'll listen, if we offer them a chance to flip the game. Mira folded her arms. Even if they did, the numbers don't add up. The Consortium's asset base dwarfs us. You could pile every Terran coin together and still fall short. Elias nodded slowly. Directly, yes. But Valen Prime operates under Consortium law, and that law allows for acquisitions if a majority of shareholders agree. Not the whole bank. Just this planet. And this planet, he tapped the projection of the gleaming world, is the seat of their power. Whoever owns Valen Prime controls the ledger. Imani straightened, eyes narrowing. You mean to buy the planet itself? That's right, Elias said. We don't need to topple the Consortium galaxy-wide. We need to own their throne. Once the registry marks Valen Prime under Terran control, they can deny it all they like, but the law will bind them. They'll be forced to recognize us as equals. Mira shook her head, but there was no fire in it now. Even if we accept this insanity, you'll never rally the diaspora fast enough. The Consortium will catch wind and crush it before we begin. Elias gave a crooked grin. Then we move faster than they can imagine. We don't plead. We don't negotiate. We act. Hours later, the Terran delegation's secure channel pulsed to life. Holograms of men and women flickered into the chamber, scarred asteroid captains, sharp-eyed Martian financiers, lunar guild representatives with calculating glares. The diaspora's power was scattered, yes, but here it was, raw and untapped. Imani did the introductions, his voice formal. We convene on short notice because Earth stands at a crossroads. Captain Reese has a proposal. Elias stepped into the light. His words carried neither apology nor hesitation. You've all felt the Consortium's grip. High-interest loans. Trade tariffs designed to keep us dependent. We asked for a fair chance today, and they laughed. So here's the counteroffer, we stop asking. We buy their planet. A silence followed, thick as vacuum. Then a bark of laughter erupted from a Belter captain, her hologram flickering with static. Buy Valen Prime? Reese, you've been breathing too much recycled air. Others joined with scoffs, mutters, disbelief. A Martian banker leaned forward, sharp as a blade. Do you have any idea what that world's valuation is? You're proposing the impossible. Exactly, Elias said. His gaze swept the crowd. But impossible things are what humans do when survival's on the line. We've done it before. We'll do it again. And I'll tell you why this matters. Whoever owns Valen Prime controls the books. Every loan, every tariff, every debt they've shackled us with. We flip those ledgers, and suddenly, humanity isn't a beggar at their table. We're the host. The Lunar Guild Master frowned. Even if we entertain this madness, how do you outpace the Consortium's surveillance? Elias's grin sharpened. By using the one blind spot they can't calculate, trust. Not in their ledgers, but in each other. No bureaucratic process, no interstellar transfers. We move human wealth through networks they can't trace, hand to hand, code to code, ship to ship. 1,000 small streams, converging before they even notice. For the first time, silence carried weight not of dismissal but consideration. The Belter captain who'd laughed now squinted thoughtfully. If what you say is true, you'll need more than numbers. You'll need signatures. Representation strong enough to sway the registry. Elias nodded. That's why I'm here. Not just to pitch a dream. To demand commitment. If each of you brings your stake, every share, every bond, every promise of credit, then together, we can reach the threshold. Alone, we're beggars. United, we're buyers. Mira held her breath as the holograms flickered with shifting expressions. Resistance lingered, but it was cracking. The diaspora had lived too long under the consortium's shadow. Pride and resentment simmered. Elias had given them an outlet. At last, the Martian banker spoke, voice tight. You realize if we fail, the consortium will retaliate. They'll blacklist every Terran port. They'll choke us out. Elias met his gaze squarely. If we fail, we starve anyway. The difference is, this way, we starve standing up. The silence broke with murmurs, nods, reluctant agreements. One by one, the holograms voiced their pledges. Not all, some still withheld, cautious, but enough to spark momentum. When the last projection winked out, Mira exhaled shakily. You just pulled half the diaspora into open defiance. Do you have any idea what you've started? Elias sank back into his chair, exhaustion creeping into his bones, but a fire still burned behind his eyes. Yes. A revolution measured not in battles, but in ledgers. Imani gave a low, almost reverent chuckle. You may actually pull this off. Not me, Elias corrected softly. Us. Humanity. He glanced at the crystalline wall, imagining Zoran behind it, already sensing ripples he could not stop. For the first time in centuries, the consortium wasn't in control of the game. And Elias intended to keep it that way. The Grand Ledger Hall of Valen Prime had never known silence like this. Its towering crystal columns refracted light across 100 alien delegates, each waiting for the ritual of numbers to begin. The hall was built to showcase dominance, every sound carried like a decree, every shimmer of crystal a reminder that here, finance was law. But today, the law was about to change. Captain Elias Reese stood at the Terran delegation's table, Counselor Mira on one side, Imani on the other. His uniform was plain compared to the jeweled robes of alien traders, yet it was his presence that drew attention. Humans had walked these halls before as supplicants, beggars, debtors. Never as challengers. At the head dais, Archivist Zoran Tala's crystalline facets gleamed under the vault light. His voice struck the chamber like breaking glass. Proceedings commence. Petition for Terran debt reconsideration, rejected previously. No further discussion permitted. Elias's lips curved in the faintest smile. Then we'll open a new petition. Zoran tilted his faceted head, crystalline ridges scraping faintly. Procedure requires standing. You possess none. That's where you're wrong, Elias said calmly. He pressed his hand against the table's console. The chamber projection flared to life. Across the hall, holographic streams ignited, names, signatures, credits, shares. Thousands of them. Martian syndicates, lunar guilds, belt miners, Titan cooperatives, Europa traders. Each pledged their stake, their assets, their wealth. The streams converged into a single banner that glowed above the Terran table, majority shareholder petition filed. The hall erupted in discordant vibrations. Alien delegates shifted, voices grinding in disbelief. No human petition had ever triggered the majority clause. Elias's voice cut through the uproar. We're not here to renegotiate alone. We're here to acquire Valen Prime. Zoran's facets dimmed, then blazed dangerously bright. Absurd. Legal, Elias countered. He projected a section of consortium law, the same law the aliens had always used against humanity. Any entity securing majority representation of active shares may petition for planetary transfer of registry. Imani leaned in and whispered, awed. You actually found the loophole. Didn't find it, Elias murmured back. We built it. The chamber's presiding adjudicator, a neutral synthetic intelligence, pulsed with pale light. Its voice was calm, without inflection. Majority verified. Petition stands. Transfer hearing initiated. Zoran surged forward, crystalline body grinding across his dais. This is theft. Subversion. Elias's gaze was steady. It's business. Your business. You set the rules, Archivist. We're just finally rich enough, and angry enough, to play. Delegates muttered in growing frenzy. The concept was unthinkable, an upstart species buying the very planet that served as the consortium's throne. Yet the law was ironbound. The registry's systems already churned, validating Terran claims, cross-checking every signature. Zoran struck back, his voice rising in sharp, cutting tones. Even united, you lack the liquidity for valuation. This planet's worth is beyond your species' collective capacity. Elias triggered the next projection. A cascade of figures filled the chamber: resource rights, trade surpluses, pledged collateral from across the human diaspora. Then came the final shock: the Belt miners' reserves of rare isotopes, long hoarded, now pledged in full. The value eclipsed even the consortium's estimate. Elias let the silence stretch before he spoke. You see debts. We see investments. And together they're enough. The adjudicator's light pulsed brighter. Valuation threshold achieved. Registry acknowledges petition as valid. The words rippled through the hall like thunder. Humanity had crossed the line. Zoran's crystalline body pulsed with furious light. You will regret this. Ownership is not control. The consortium does not bow. Elias stepped closer, voice low but carrying. We didn't come for a bow. We came for a seat. And we just bought the table you're sitting at. For a moment, even the crystalline bankers froze. The weight of those words was undeniable. The registry transfer took hours, every second filled with tense waiting as protocols ticked down. Delegates argued, protested, tried to stall. But the law was the law. And by the time the chamber lights dimmed, Valen Prime's ownership records bore a new designation: United Terran Coalition. Mira stared at the confirmation, her voice a whisper. It worked. Imani chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. By the stars, it actually worked. Elias remained still, absorbing the reality. Against every prediction, humanity had gone from debtor to owner in a single stroke. They hadn't begged for recognition. They'd bought it. Zoran approached, crystalline ridges grinding like knives. His voice was cold, quieter now, but dangerous in its restraint. You believe this victory makes you safe. It does not. You have painted a target on your species. The consortium will not forgive. Elias met his glare without flinching. Maybe not. But they'll respect us. And that's a start. Zoran's light dimmed, then flared once more in something Elias almost thought was admiration. Reckless. Audacious. Very human. He turned and withdrew, leaving behind the faint echo of grinding crystal. Later, as the Terran delegation walked out into the crystalline night of Valen Prime, the planet itself seemed different. The air carried the same sharp chill, the towers of faceted stone still glittered beneath the binary stars. But for the first time, humans walked these streets not as tenants, but as owners. Myra's steps slowed. Do you realize what happens now? Every alien power in the galaxy will test us. They'll try to pry this away, undermine it, maybe even fight for it. Elias looked up at the twin suns burning bright above the horizon. Good. Let them. At least now we're worth fighting. Imani smiled wearily. And what do we call this? Not a war, not a rebellion, what is it? Elias considered, then gave a quiet laugh. Call it the first time humanity stopped asking for permission. They reached the plaza overlooking the ledger hall. Below them, crowds of alien citizens stared, some in shock, some in resentment, a few in quiet respect. Whispers rippled. The humans bought the bank. The humans owned the ledger. For centuries, humanity had been dismissed as reckless borrowers, fragile and weak. Tonight that perception cracked. Elias Reese stood with his delegation, his voice soft but unshakable. We weren't given a place in their galaxy. So we took one. And from here on out, they'll have to deal with us as equals. The binary stars flared across Valen Prime's sky, casting long shadows that stretched toward a future no ledger could predict.